Happy to be here. Happy to have an off day. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with myself.
Sorry for the early text on your off day, man. As soon
Yeah.
as I sent it, I
Hey,
was
well,
like,
you want to
damn
wake up and
it.
talk some Saints,
My
Mike?
bad, my bad.
Let's go.
Have you covered a camp where the Saints have so many roster spots already taken before they even get on the field? I mean, it seems like there's like 47, 48 spots of the
Right.
53 already taken.
Well, yeah, I would agree with you, but I would also say that's sort of been par for the course for this team for a while. They did do a rebuild after those 7 and 9 seasons and overhauled things, but there've been a lot of seasons here since they have the same coach, the same GM, a lot of same pieces that's kind of the norm. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why they've had the fewest draft picks in the league during the Peyton Breeze era. Even last year, what did they do? They ended up cutting like 4 of their actual draft picks last year. It is a hard roster to make.
When you look at the position battles, which ones interest you more?
Well, I mean, obviously center is the one that's the most wide open and probably important. Although it is hard to sit there at a training camp practice and evaluate how the centers are doing, especially when they're not tackling and sometimes not even in pads. I'm curious about Eric McCoy's development. I'll be watching him in the preseason games, though, for sure, and it's his job to lose. He's out there the most often with the ones. I think the good problem to have for the Saints is at nickelback. I think it's surprising. I think P.J. Williams did a lot better than fans give him credit for once they moved him inside to the nickel the second half of last season. But I am surprised that he has been with the ones all summer and Patrick Robinson with the twos. And then the rookie C.J. Gardner-Johnson is every bit in that battle too. So that's a good battle for them to have. I think the most important thing to do is to find a third defensive end that they can trust since Alex Okafor is gone. Trey Hendrickson is making an early move there, but that's the area of the team that concerns me the most is who's going to be rushing the passer because I'm concerned about a drop off there.
Yeah, and look, well, in line with that, then, how has Marcus Davenport looked so far, Mike? Because for how important he looks to be for this team, I just haven't heard a lot about him here a couple weeks in.
Well, the problem is he plays another position that it's just impossible to say how he's doing when they're not allowed to tackle the quarterback and they're not allowed to tackle the running back. But I would say in between. We talk to coaches, we talk to assistant coaches, we talk to people on and off the record, and I've heard nice things. He's developing, probably on schedule. I have not heard wow comments about him, but look, he's going to make a leap just on its face. I mean, first of all, they expected him to be a raw developmental player when they got him out of Texas San Antonio, and he was a basketball player or a wide receiver not too long ago, a long, skinny guy that they knew was going to take some developing. So he was a prime candidate for a year 2 leap anyway. And then the fact that he played with that toe injury for the second half of last season, had surgery after the season, just getting healthier is going to be a big boost for him. And he has always talked about, how his confidence and his feeling that he belongs in the NFL is what kept improving last year. So he is going to take a leap. I don't know if it's going to be like what Jason Pierre-Paul did in his second season, but I think he's going to go from playing 50% of the snaps to 75% of the snaps. And if he's healthy, he could absolutely be a double-digit sack guy. And I don't know if he could be better than Alex Okafor, but let's just say he's as good as Okafor was the last 2 years. That's great. My concern is that even if Davenport takes that leap, they still need a third guy to be what Davenport was last year.
Yeah, and I think you're Sheldon Rankins absent, providing pressure up the middle, going to be missed there as well. On the opposite side of the ball, talking to Mike Triplett, covers the Saints for ESPN. The Nick Easton contract is interesting to me, Mike, because it's a pretty good amount of money for a player that right now looks like he may be that interior swing backup. Is it fair to say that maybe that Easton contract is even about like preparing for the exit of Andrus Peat in the future? Like how do you read the amount of money that the Saints signed Easton to versus the role that it looks like he's kind of falling into?
Well, first of all, they signed him before they drafted McCoy, and in a draft where they only have, was it 5 picks going into the draft and no first rounder, they couldn't have known for sure they were going to come away with a center. So I don't, I think it was partly about making sure that they didn't force themselves into drafting a center, and they ended up doing it anyway. The other thing, though, is the way that contract was designed, they can get out of it very easily after this year. It was actually a rare contract that it could be just 1 year and $4 million. Next year, they could pay him 5. The year after that, they could pay him 6 more. It's like staggered, where if he keeps earning a spot, he makes more money. He gets a little raise built in each year. But they are not tied to him beyond this year. So it's possible he could be expendable. I am very curious about that position because he is a guard center. Cameron Thomas is a guard center. Will Clapp is a guard center, and it feels pretty redundant now. Obviously, depth is a great thing to have on the offensive line, especially if Pete's ever going to kick out and be the backup left tackle. They might need more guards, so they could all make the team. But they're not married to Easton long term if he winds up being second or third in the pecking order there.
Are they still looking for a number 2 wideout?
Well, I mean, I think that's Ted Ginn Jr. In a sense. I mean, he's going to be the guy running the deep routes. The safeties still have to respect him. I think it's so funny when fans say that's what they think is missing in this offense is the guy who can stretch the field, because Ted Ginn still stretches the field, and defenses really respect him. That it's not a big part of what the Saints throw, though, obviously, with Drew Brees. But, yeah, I would say the third receiver, who's going to be the slot receiver, is an area where I was kind of surprised they weren't more aggressive in free agency. And I think, Keith Kirkwood and Austin Carr are really the only guys with great slot receiver experience. Traquan Smith is an outside guy like Ted Ginn Jr. Perhaps Rashard Matthews could do it. I don't know where he is in their pecking order. I don't know exactly what kind of receiver Emmanuel Butler will be if he makes this team, or Simi Cobbs Jr. So, I am curious if there's a slot receiver that can play that old Lance Moore, Willie Snead role, and I think Keith Kirkwood's probably the favorite for that. But that was receiver depth is a concern, proven receiver depth. But I do like Jared Cook a lot. I like Ted Ginn coming back, and then obviously Thomas and Kamara. It's a pretty solid top 4 now compared to what they had by the end of last season.
So, Mike, how would you compare the 2011 kind of trio of Sproles, Graham, Colston to Kamara, Thomas, Cook? And is that even a fair comparison to make?
Well, I mean, that is a fair comparison to make. I mean, I would say Kamara, especially on offense, is a boost from what Sproles was on offense. I mean, Sproles was a nice offensive complement, but he wasn't, threatening 2,000 yards from scrimmage. And I think you definitely say Thomas is a bump up from either Jimmy Graham or Marcus Colston, a slight bump up. And then, Cook is a downgrade from Jimmy Graham, but could be a nice piece. But when you add them all together with Thomas and Kamara probably being the 2 top skill position players they've ever had, I would put those trios next to each other, and you could have a long debate about it. The difference is that 2011 offense also had Lance Moore. It also had Peter Thomas. It also had Mark Ingram. It also had did they not have Meacham anymore by then, or they still had Devery, or they might have had both of them?
Yeah.
The depth of that 2011 offense was insane compared to this one.
Mike, enjoy your day off. Thank you for the time this morning.